In Influence, New and Expanded, Robert Cialdini reveals the powerful psychological principles that drive people to say yes, and how you can ethically use them to persuade, negotiate, and lead more effectively. Drawing on decades of research, Cialdini updates his classic work with new insights into digital influence, social proof, and the modern persuasion landscape. In this video from Detailed Book Summaries, we break down the key principles of persuasion, including reciprocity, scarcity, authority, and more, so you can apply them in your business, relationships, and everyday life. If you want to master the science of influence, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to get every new summary we release. In Influence, New and Expanded, Robert Cialdini, renowned as the godfather of persuasion, unveils the timeless principles that make people say yes, and how you can ethically harness them to become more persuasive in every part of your life. Updated with fresh research and examples from the digital age, this edition covers classic triggers like reciprocity, scarcity, and authority, plus new insights into social proof, unity, and how technology amplifies influence in ways we've never seen before. In this video from Detailed Book Summaries, we break down Cialdini's most powerful lessons so you can apply them to sales, leadership, negotiations, and everyday conversations. If you're ready to master the psychology of persuasion, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to get our latest book breakdowns. In Influence, New and Expanded, Robert Cialdini, widely regarded as the world's leading expert on persuasion, reveals the psychology behind why people say yes, and how you can ethically apply these principles to win trust, negotiate better deals, and lead more effectively. Updated for today's digital world, this edition includes brand new insights into the modern science of influence, from social proof in the age of social media to the subtle ways scarcity and authority shape our decisions. In this video from Detailed Book Summaries, we unpack Cialdini's 7 universal principles of persuasion, so you can apply them in business, relationships, and everyday life. If you want to become more influential and persuasive, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss our latest summaries. Chapter 1: Weapons of Influence, the Science of Persuasion. Imagine for a moment that you're walking down the street, and a stranger suddenly asks you for a small favor. Maybe they want a few minutes of your time, or help carrying something heavy. More often than not, you'll say yes even if you don't know them. Why? What invisible forces make you comply without much thought? Robert Cialdini opens Influence by revealing that human behavior is often governed by automatic responses, shortcuts our brains take to decide what to do. These shortcuts save mental energy and help us navigate complex social situations quickly, but they also make us vulnerable to manipulation. Cialdini calls these shortcuts weapons of influence. These are psychological triggers that, when activated, cause people to say yes almost reflexively. They're like buttons that, when pushed, trigger automatic compliance. Understanding these weapons is the foundation of mastering persuasion, both to influence others ethically and to protect yourself from being exploited. The first weapon Cialdini introduces is reciprocity, the powerful rule that people feel obligated to return favors or concessions. If someone does something for you, you want to repay that kindness. It's why free samples in stores work so well. Receiving something unexpected creates a sense of indebtedness. He shares stories of how this principle is used in everyday life, from charities sending small gifts to solicit donations, to salespeople offering free trials to hook customers. The clever use of reciprocity can turn a simple no into a heartfelt yes. Next, Cialdini explains the commitment and consistency principle. Humans have a deep desire to be consistent with what they've said or done before. Once we commit to something publicly, we feel psychological pressure to follow through, even if it no longer serves us. This tendency can be leveraged to steer decisions, as people don't want to appear fickle or contradictory. Cialdini illustrates this with examples such as foot-in-the-door techniques, where a small initial request is followed by a larger one, increasing compliance because people want to stay consistent with their earlier agreement. The third weapon is social proof, the idea that people look to others to determine what is correct or acceptable behavior, especially in uncertain situations. This is why testimonials, crowd popularity, and peer pressure have such a profound effect. If many people are doing something, we assume it must be right. Cialdini discusses how advertisers show products as best sellers, and how people's behavior changes in emergencies based on how many others react. Then there's liking, the tendency to comply with requests from people we like. Physical attractiveness, similarity, compliments, and cooperation all boost liking. Salespeople, politicians, and influencers carefully cultivate likability to win compliance. Finally, Cialdini presents authority. Humans have a strong tendency to obey figures of authority or experts, often without question. Uniforms, titles, and credentials serve as symbols that activate this obedience reflex, sometimes with dangerous consequences. These weapons are effective because they tap into deeply ingrained human social behaviors. Cialdini warns, however, that these shortcuts can be exploited in manipulative ways. Throughout the chapter, he emphasizes awareness as the best defense. By recognizing these triggers, you gain power over them. You can choose when to comply, when to resist, and when to ethically use persuasion yourself. Cialdini's early research sets the stage for the rest of the book, promising to unravel the psychology behind influence with clarity, real-world examples, and practical advice. By understanding these weapons of influence, you begin to see the hidden forces shaping your decisions every day, from ads to conversations to social interactions, and how to wield or defend against them. Chapter 2: Reciprocation, the old give and take. Reciprocity. It's one of the oldest and strongest social rules we live by. The moment someone does something for us, our brain lights up with a powerful urge. We must return the favor. It's baked deep into human nature, a social glue that keeps relationships and societies running smoothly. But as Robert Cialdini reveals, this natural rule can be hijacked, exploited, and turned into a persuasion weapon. Cialdini begins by explaining how this rule works on a simple psychological level. When someone gives us something, we feel indebted. That feeling is uncomfortable, and the quickest way to relieve it is to give back. This isn't about conscious calculation, it happens automatically, an instinct drilled into us from early human history. He illustrates this with examples that might surprise you. The Hare Krishna devotees, for example, used to hand out small gifts, flowers, or booklets in public places. Even when recipients didn't want the gift, the act created a debt that often ended with the giver asking for a donation. People felt obliged to give back after receiving something free, even if the gift was unwanted. Cialdini dives deeper, revealing the unequal exchanges that reciprocity can produce. The rule doesn't say favors have to be equal. The expectation is to repay in kind, but often the return favor is bigger, more valuable, or more demanding than the original gift. This is why free samples work so well. A tiny free taste creates a pressure to buy the full product, a much larger exchange. The principle also explains why door-in-the-face tactics are so effective. Imagine a charity worker asks you for a huge donation, one you'd never agree to. When they follow it up with a smaller request, suddenly the smaller ask seems reasonable, and you're much more likely to comply. Your brain says, "They gave me a concession, so I should give one back." Cialdini shares fascinating research about how ingrained and universal reciprocity is. Almost every culture on Earth follows this rule, underscoring its power. But there's a catch. The reciprocity rule can trap you in manipulative cycles. Once you accept a gift, even unwillingly, you're vulnerable to requests you wouldn't normally entertain. Con artists, salespeople, and politicians exploit this by offering favors, freebies, or concessions to create obligation. Cialdini offers practical advice. Be wary of gifts or favors that come with strings attached. Remember that you can reject gifts politely if you want to avoid feeling indebted. Recognize when someone's giving you something just to gain leverage. Finally, the chapter highlights the positive side of reciprocity. It's a force for goodwill and cooperation. When used sincerely, it builds trust, strengthens bonds, and creates lasting relationships. The takeaway: reciprocity is a powerful persuasion tool. It's automatic, deeply felt, and almost impossible to ignore. Being aware of its pull lets you control how you respond and helps you use it ethically to influence others. Chapter 3: Commitment and Consistency, the Hobgoblins of the Mind. Have you ever noticed how once you make a choice or take a stand, you feel a powerful pressure to behave consistently with that commitment? It's like an invisible force pulls you forward, shaping your future decisions and actions. Robert Cialdini calls this the principle of commitment and consistency, one of the most potent weapons of influence in human behavior. Cialdini opens the chapter by explaining that humans have a deep psychological need to be consistent with their past actions and statements. This need is rooted in our desire to be seen as reliable, stable, and rational by ourselves and others. Consistency creates a sense of identity and self-respect. When we act inconsistently, it can cause inner tension or cognitive dissonance, an uncomfortable feeling we naturally want to avoid. This drive toward consistency can be manipulated, and it often is. Cialdini shares striking examples. One famous study involved salespeople getting people to agree to a small request first, like putting a small sign in their window supporting safe driving. Later, these same people were more likely to agree to a much larger request, such as putting a huge billboard in their yard. Why? Because their initial small commitment created a psychological bond they needed to honor by staying consistent. This technique is known as the foot in the door tactic. It works because once you say yes to a small favor, your self-image shifts. You begin to see yourself as the kind of person who supports the cause or agrees with the request, making it easier to say yes to bigger asks. Cialdini also points out that commitments are stronger when they are active, spoken or written out rather than just thought; public, made in front of others; effortful, requiring work or sacrifice. For example, people who publicly pledge to quit smoking are more likely to succeed than those who only think about it privately. The dark side. Manipulators exploit this need for consistency by getting you to commit in small ways that lock you into a path, even if it's not in your best interest. Think about pushy salespeople, high-pressure fundraisers, or political campaigns that seek small wins to build momentum. Cialdini warns us about the illusion of irrevocability, feeling trapped by our own commitments. The key is to be mindful before you commit, especially publicly or in writing. The chapter also touches on lowballing, where a seller gets you to agree to a deal, then changes the terms to be less favorable, counting on your desire to stay consistent and not back out. Understanding commitment and consistency gives you a shield against undue influence. By recognizing when your need for consistency is being exploited, you can pause, reflect, and choose whether to stay true to your values, not just past actions. On the positive side, harnessing this principle ethically lets you build trust, encourage positive habits, and strengthen your personal and professional relationships. In the end, Cialdini reminds us that commitment and consistency are powerful, natural forces that shape human behavior deeply. Once you grasp how they work, you gain control over when to use or resist them. Chapter 4: Social Proof. Truths are US. Humans are wired to follow the crowd, especially when faced with uncertainty or ambiguity. The principle of social proof is a powerful psychological force that compels us to look at the actions of others to guide our own behavior. When we're unsure, our default reaction is to ask, "What are others doing?" Because following the majority feels safe and sensible. This instinct helped our ancestors survive in complex social environments. If everyone is running, it's probably wise to run too. Social proof becomes most potent in situations where we don't know what to do or how to act, and it's magnified when the people we observe are similar to us: friends, neighbors, peers. The more alike they are, the stronger the influence. For example, if people who share your interests, background, or status start buying a product, you're more likely to jump on the bandwagon because it feels relevant to you. Cialdini illustrates this with simple, everyday examples. Imagine walking down a street and noticing a crowd staring at something above. Your curiosity kicks in and you stop to look up too, not wanting to miss what everyone else is seeing. Or think about a restaurant with a long line outside. You immediately infer that the food must be excellent because so many people are willing to wait. That line alone becomes proof of quality. In emergencies, social proof can sometimes hinder action. The phenomenon known as pluralistic ignorance means that if no one else reacts, we assume there's no problem and stay passive. However, a single person breaking the silence can trigger a cascade of responses. One courageous act breaks the spell, inspiring others to follow. Marketers know this instinctive response well and exploit it constantly. Testimonials, celebrity endorsements, bestseller tags, and user reviews all work because they provide social proof that others have already tested and approved a product or idea. We trust the crowd's judgment and often feel reassured by it. For example, seeing thousands of positive reviews on a product makes us feel confident to buy it, even if we have no personal experience. But social proof can be a double-edged sword. While it offers a shortcut to decision-making, it can also lead us astray. When people blindly follow the crowd, it can result in herd mentality or mob behavior, where bad decisions spread rapidly. People can end up doing things they wouldn't normally consider, simply because everyone else is doing it. Cialdini highlights how social proof is particularly influential when behavior is public and visible. When actions are observed by others, we feel more pressure to conform. This explains why trends spread faster in social environments where people can see and copy each other's behavior. Experiments demonstrate just how malleable we are to social proof. For instance, participants in studies have been swayed by fake testimonials or fabricated crowd reactions, revealing how easy it is to manufacture the illusion of consensus and influence behavior. Understanding social proof equips you to recognize when you're being nudged by the crowd and empowers you to decide whether the behavior fits your own values and interests. It also shows how to harness social proof ethically, by sharing genuine feedback or showcasing authentic support, to build trust and positively influence others. In essence, social proof acts like a mental shortcut, helping us make quick decisions based on others' actions. But that shortcut can sometimes lead us off course if we follow blindly. The challenge is to remain aware, question the crowd when necessary, and use the power of social proof with wisdom and integrity. Chapter 5: Liking, the Friendly Thief. We're all vulnerable to liking, the simple yet powerful principle that people say yes to those they like. Robert Cialdini reveals that whether we're aware of it or not, our feelings about someone's friendliness, attractiveness, similarity, or compliments can heavily sway our decisions. Liking is a surprisingly effective influence tactic because it appeals to our basic human desire for connection and approval. Cialdini begins by explaining that people prefer to say yes to those they find likable. This likability often stems from several key factors. First, physical attractiveness plays a huge role, even if we don't consciously admit it. Attractive people tend to be perceived as more trustworthy, intelligent, and competent. This halo effect means we often accept their requests without skepticism. Second, similarity drives liking. We are drawn to people who share our attitudes, values, interests, or backgrounds. It feels comfortable and affirming to agree with those like us, and this comfort makes us more susceptible to their influence. Whether it's a salesperson who shares your hobbies or a colleague with similar tastes, that similarity breeds trust and cooperation. Third, compliments and praise work like magic. Genuine flattery activates positive feelings and a desire to reciprocate. When someone praises us, we naturally want to please them back, even if the compliments are somewhat manipulative or exaggerated. Fourth, familiarity increases liking. The more exposure we have to someone or something, the more we tend to like it. This is called the mere exposure effect. Advertisers exploit this by repeatedly showing their brands until they feel familiar and trustworthy. Cialdini shares memorable stories and experiments to demonstrate these points. One study showed how salespeople who compliment customers first sell more because they create an immediate bond of liking. Another example involves people agreeing to a favor from a stranger who shares their birthday, a small but powerful similarity that increases trust. The chapter also warns about the dangers of liking-based influence. Con artists, scam artists, and manipulators often use charm, flattery, and shared interests to disarm their victims. Because we want to believe and connect, we sometimes overlook red flags. Liking becomes especially powerful when paired with other influence principles like commitment and consistency or social proof. For instance, if you like someone and see others liking them too, you're even more likely to comply with their requests. But the real takeaway is that liking is a natural and important social glue, connecting us, fostering cooperation, and smoothing interactions. Understanding it helps you recognize when your feelings toward someone might be pushing your decisions and equips you to guard against undue influence. At the same time, when used ethically, liking can help build genuine relationships, open doors, and create positive influence that benefits everyone involved. Chapter 6: Authority-Directed Deference. From the moment we are born, we learn to respect and obey authority figures. This ingrained tendency to defer to those who appear to hold power, knowledge, or expertise is one of the strongest psychological triggers that guide human behavior. Robert Cialdini explains that authority functions as a mental shortcut. When faced with complex decisions, we instinctively trust and comply with those who seem legitimate experts or leaders. This saves us time and effort, But it also opens the door for influence that can be both helpful and dangerous. One of the most famous examples illustrating the power of authority is the Milgram experiment. In this study, ordinary people were willing to administer what they thought were painful electric shocks to another person simply because an authoritative figure, a man in a lab coat, told them to continue. This experiment revealed the astonishing extent to which humans will obey authority, even when it conflicts with their moral compass. It highlighted how difficult it is to resist the pull of authority, underscoring just how deeply this principle runs in us. Cialdini breaks down the key markers that trigger our automatic obedience to authority. The first and most obvious is titles. Words like doctor, professor, captain, or CEO instantly elevate someone's status in our eyes. These titles carry an assumption of knowledge, competence, and credibility that most people accept without question. When a person introduces themselves with a powerful title, the chance that others will comply with their requests dramatically increases. Next are clothing and uniforms. Wearing a uniform, whether it's a police officer's badge, a doctor's white coat, or a military outfit, sends a strong nonverbal message of authority. We've all seen studies where simply putting on a lab coat or a suit boosts a person's perceived expertise and authority. These visual signals activate our obedience reflex because we associate them with legitimate power and responsibility. Another crucial element is trappings and symbols of status. Luxury cars, expensive watches, ornate offices, and prestigious awards act as cues that signal authority and success. Even without formal titles, these symbols persuade us that someone deserves respect and deference. We assume that such visible signs come with real competence and influence, making us more willing to listen and follow. Cialdini warns that these markers can be faked or exaggerated. People can adopt fake titles, counterfeit uniforms, or stage elaborate displays of wealth to create the illusion of authority. Because our brains are wired to respond reflexively to these cues, we can be fooled into obedience by imposters or manipulators. This vulnerability is exploited in sales, scams, and even politics. The chapter also explores how advertisers and salespeople use authority to boost compliance. For example, a salesman dressed in a lab coat seems more credible than one in casual clothes, even if he has no medical background. Endorsements by so-called experts or celebrities leverage authority to persuade consumers, regardless of the actual relevance of that expertise. We often give undue weight to these endorsements simply because of the authority figure's perceived status. However, authority's power is not absolute. If an authority figure loses credibility by being caught in a lie, making mistakes, or contradicting other trusted sources, people's obedience declines sharply. Trust and respect are earned and maintained, not automatic forever. Ultimately, the lesson is clear. Authority is a powerful influence that should be respected, but also questioned. Recognizing the signs of authority, titles, clothing, symbols, and evaluating their legitimacy helps us make smarter decisions. Blind obedience can lead to mistakes or harm, while wise deference to genuine expertise saves time, builds trust, and opens doors. Understanding authority equips you to navigate life with greater awareness, helping you respect real knowledge and power while protecting yourself from manipulation and false claims. Chapter 7: Scarcity. The Rule of the Few. Scarcity is one of the most powerful psychological triggers in human behavior. Robert Cialdini explains that things become more valuable and desirable simply because they are rare, limited, or disappearing. This principle, the rule of the few, taps into a deep survival instinct that what is scarce must be precious, and we instinctively want to secure it before it's gone. Cialdini opens the chapter by highlighting how scarcity motivates us more strongly than abundance. When we perceive that access to a product, opportunity, or resource is limited, our desire for it intensifies. This is not just about economics but about psychology. Scarcity increases perceived value. Several key psychological mechanisms make scarcity so effective. First is loss aversion. The fear of losing out on something valuable triggers a sense of urgency and a motivation to act quickly. We hate missing out, and scarcity makes us feel like the clock is ticking. Second, scarcity suggests exclusivity. If something is rare, owning or experiencing it makes us feel special, unique, or part of a select group. This appeals to our need for status and belonging. Third, scarcity can also heighten reactance. a psychological pushback we feel when our freedom to choose or access something is threatened. When options narrow, we want to reclaim that freedom, often by wanting the scarce thing even more. Cialdini shares vivid examples to illustrate these points. One classic experiment showed how cookies placed in a jar were rated as tastier when the supply was limited rather than plentiful. Another example involves retailers using limited time or limited quantity offers to drive rapid sales, tapping directly into scarcity's motivating force. The chapter discusses how scarcity is frequently used in marketing and sales. Limited edition products, flash sales, exclusive memberships, and deadline-driven discounts all exploit scarcity to push consumers to act. The pressure to get it before it's gone overrides careful deliberation, sometimes leading to impulsive or regrettable decisions. Cialdini also explains the deadline tactic, creating artificial time limits to spur urgency. When people feel they have a closing window to act, their resistance drops and compliance rises. This urgency accelerates decision-making, often at the expense of rational analysis. The power of scarcity extends beyond material goods to information and opportunities. For example, when certain knowledge or access is restricted, people perceive it as more valuable and seek it more avidly. Similarly, in social settings, scarce attention or affection becomes more prized. However, the chapter warns of scarcity's dark side. Manipulators, from dishonest salespeople to con artists, frequently use false scarcity claims to pressure and deceive. Fake last-chance offers or artificially limited stocks can manipulate emotions and bypass critical thinking. The key takeaway is to recognize scarcity cues and pause to evaluate their legitimacy. Ask yourself, is this really scarce? Or is scarcity being used as a pressure tactic? This awareness helps you resist undue influence and make more considered choices. Understanding scarcity empowers you to harness it ethically when appropriate, creating genuine urgency and value, while protecting yourself against manipulative scarcity ploys. Chapter 8. Commitment and Consistency. Hobgoblins of the Mind. Humans have a deep need to be consistent, to align their thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors in a coherent pattern. Robert Cialdini calls this drive the hobgoblin of the mind, a mental force that compels us to stay true to our commitments and avoid cognitive dissonance. This principle of commitment and consistency is one of the most potent tools of influence, because once we commit, especially publicly or actively, we feel psychological pressure to behave in ways that align with that commitment. Cialdini explains that consistency helps us create a stable self-image. When we make a decision, take a stance, or express a belief, we want to appear reliable and trustworthy to others and ourselves. Changing course or contradicting our previous actions threatens our sense of identity, causing discomfort and uncertainty. This psychological need is exploited by influencers through several well-studied techniques. First is the foot-in-the-door technique, where a small initial request is made and accepted, creating a commitment that makes agreeing to a larger request later much more likely. For example, a salesperson might ask you to answer a few questions before pitching a product. Because you agreed once, you're much more likely to say yes again. Second, the lowball technique involves getting a commitment under favorable terms, then changing the deal to be less advantageous. People often comply with the less favorable terms to remain consistent with their earlier yes. Third, public commitments are powerful. When commitments are made openly and visibly, social pressure to be consistent grows stronger. This can be seen in situations like signing petitions, posting goals publicly, or making declarations in front of others. Cialdini shares real-life examples such as the Hare Krishna movement, where followers would first ask for a small donation or signature, then gradually escalate their demands, leveraging consistency at every step. Another important factor is that consistency becomes automatic. Once committed, people act with less conscious thought to uphold their self-image, even if the original reasons for the commitment fade. This can lead to stubbornness and entrenchment in poor decisions. Marketers use consistency to lock consumers into ongoing relationships through subscriptions, membership renewals, and loyalty programs. Once a customer takes the first step, the drive for consistency helps keep them engaged over time. Cialdini cautions that this drive for consistency can also cause us to justify unethical or harmful behavior, simply because we've invested in it or committed to it publicly. Understanding this allows us to recognize when consistency is being weaponized, and gives us the chance to consciously reevaluate our commitments. The chapter concludes with the advice to be mindful before making commitments, especially public or active ones, and to allow ourselves permission to reconsider and change course when necessary. Recognizing the pull of consistency empowers you to make freer, wiser choices rather than being bound by past decisions. Chapter 9: Liking, the Friendly Thief. Humans are wired to say yes to people they like. This simple but powerful truth underpins much of the persuasive power in everyday life. Robert Cialdini calls liking the friendly thief because it can quietly lead us to compliance and agreement, often without us realizing how much our fondness or admiration for someone influences our decisions. Cialdini explains that we are far more likely to be influenced by someone who is likable, and likability depends on several important factors. The first is physical attractiveness. People tend to associate beauty with positive traits, competence, intelligence, trustworthiness, even if those traits are unrelated. This halo effect means attractive people get more opportunities and enjoy greater influence. The second factor is similarity. We like people who are like us, those who share our opinions, interests, values, or backgrounds. This sense of common ground creates a bond that makes us more open to their suggestions and requests. Salespeople and negotiators often use this by mirroring body language or finding shared experiences to build rapport. Third is compliments. Genuine or even strategically delivered flattery makes people feel good and creates goodwill. When someone compliments us, we feel a subtle obligation to reciprocate, often by saying yes or cooperating. Fourth, contact and cooperation foster liking. Spending time together or working toward common goals builds trust and connection. When people collaborate, their affinity increases, making them more persuasive. Finally, Cialdini discusses the power of association. We tend to like people and things that are connected with things we already like. For example, a celebrity endorsement transfers positive feelings to a product, or a friendly salesperson associated with a trusted brand benefits from that goodwill. The chapter includes real-world examples, such as how salespeople dress and behave to enhance their likability, or how political campaigns highlight candidates' relatable qualities to connect with voters. Even seemingly small factors, smiling, friendliness, and eye contact, can tip the balance toward agreement. But the friendly thief is not always benign. Because liking can override rational judgment, it can be exploited by manipulative individuals who use charm and flattery to deceive or pressure. The warmth of likability masks the true intent behind requests, lowering defenses. Cialdini advises that awareness is key. Recognizing when liking is influencing your decisions helps maintain objectivity. Likability should be one factor among many considered, not the sole reason to comply. Ultimately, liking is a natural and valuable social glue that promotes harmony and cooperation, but like all powerful tools of influence, it must be handled with care.